Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Launchpad. My name is Zach Aubert. I'm the founder and CEO of TLP Network. And here at TLP, it's our mission to inform and inspire the explorers of tomorrow because we believe that space is better together. And today I'm joined by Derek Harris, the business operations manager at Skyrora. Skyrora aims to be the leading launch provider within the United Kingdom and are working towards their first launch of their Skyrora XL rocket later this year. Derek, thank you so much for joining me this morning for me, but evening for you, if I'm correct.
That's correct, Zach, and thank you very much for inviting us along. It's a pleasure to be here on the Launchpad today.
Well, it's great to have you. For maybe those that have never heard of Skyrora before, could you share a little bit about Skyrora's history? You're a rather new company founded in 2017, but have already developed and launched some suborbital rockets and are getting ready for your first orbital launch.
Yeah, certainly. So, as you said, we are pretty young. We're just come over 5 years old. So 2017 is when we came into that. And if you take into account the worldwide pandemic and everything, the fact that we've managed to build what we have built so far in the infrastructure and the rockets has been an absolutely amazing feat. So what have we actually done so far? Well, we've really invested in being risk averse. To do this, we've built smaller ones, the sort of things you might see in student competitions to start with, so about 2 meters tall, Skylark Nano. This was to give the team some hands-on experience because for those who may not be aware, Britain was one of the only countries to give up their actual orbital abilities. So they launched in 1971 with Black Arrow and then sort of gave up and either went with ESA or the US for launches. So all that heritage was lost and all those legislations and laws and regulations all had to be sort of rewritten from scratch. So we had to start very small. After that, we went up to our micro, which was a 2-stage vehicle, about 4 meters in length, and that went from Iceland. So that was a very northeast of Iceland, near a place called Thorshavn. And then last year in October, we again went with our next suborbital vehicle, our second largest, which is our Skylark L. And Skylark L is roughly about 11 meters in length and about 1 meter in diameter. And that one was a great experience for the team because that allowed us to set up a mobile spaceport. So there is no spaceport in Iceland. The government welcomed us, the local people, the mayor, the police, they all welcomed us in, allowed us to get a license and then to try this attempt as launch. So we gave it our best with the weather trying to throw everything at us. It got off the launch pad. We had a little bit of technical difficulties to do with the software, which meant, unfortunately, it did end up in the Norwegian Sea. But we were delighted to get off the launch pad, and we hope to go again this year.
It's exciting to hear going back. It'd be good to see another one of those. Part of Skyrora's mission is to make sure when launching rockets, if we're putting things up into orbit, that to watch the environment, that we're also making sure we're launching in an environmentally friendly manner as possible as well. You're even creating your own propellants, if I understand correctly, out of plastics. So what is Ecosene and how does that compare to other performance propellants that people may know like RP1 and stuff? And why is that so important?
Yes, well, to be honest with you, the environmental, I think the best thing we can say, the company is trying to be environmentally responsible. So there's no point being given a chance to start a new sector in a country like space and then just going, well, let's go back to the normal, let's go back to the tried and tested, especially when the environment is such a big ticket item at the moment when it comes to reviews. And for anyone that's ever been in a business, they'll be able to tell you if you build something and then have to retrospectively go back and then try and engineer out environmental issues, it costs 10 times more. So we were in a stage where at the beginning, we were like, how can we make our launches more environmentally responsible? How can we be conscious about our own footprint? And that's when it came to the two ideas, the mobile spaceport for the infrastructure. So if you do see any of our videos and photographs, you'll see we need to launch, it's about 6 containers and then on our erectors on the back of a truck. So we can go in and go out as long as we've got a hard surface. But then the big ticket item, again, as you said, there is Ecosene. So Ecosene is a process which takes previously plastics that would not be commonly recycled. So we would call it polystyrene, but you may call it packing peanuts, things like this. So the white little balls that can often be used in show business to sort of fake snow, wrappers of ready meals, things like this, which don't tend to be recycled, that just have to either be incinerated or even worse, burned. We can basically take any plastics, bar PVC, and the main reason for that is when PVC breaks down through this process, it gives us chloride gas, and unfortunately, it'll eat at the seals, and when it escapes, it's game over for anyone that's in the room, unfortunately. And I like my colleagues, and I want them to be there the next game day. So that's it. That was why we go for the other plastics that are there. So we've figured a way that we can take basically for 1 ton, so talking UK measurements here, so 1,000 kilograms of waste plastics, and that can be turned into 650 kilograms of usable fuels. And depending how you mix it, so being from Scotland, I tend to use the whiskey metaphor. Depending how you blend it and what you blend it with will depend out what comes out the other side. So if you use low-grade plastics, you will get a low-grade fuels. If you do the higher end, so things like polystyrene, if we use more polystyrene, that will give us more fuels that are in the sort of Jet A1 and rocket propellant fuels. So how does it prepare, or how does it compare even to RP1? Well, when we've been doing engine tests at the moment, so before we can get any of the fuels signed off for regular use in all markets, we need to do some testing with it. So we've tested it on our own test stands, we've tested it on our own vehicles, and these have basically came back showing a few good things with this. One is there's no real difference in performance. We've had maybe about 5 engine tests with it, which we've seen, and the performance is almost equal to it. What we're finding when we're taking the sort of the carbon particles, the black particles coming out of it, when we're looking at that, we're looking at sulfur, we are seeing lower emissions. The sulfur is a big one. So when people think about greenhouse gases, it's always the carbon ones that go to start with, because these are the easiest ones for people to cut down on. But things like sulfur, the silver oxides are really bad as well. So this system actually allows us to go from, I think it's 0.001 to 0.00001 per kilogram of fuels. And if you take the carbon over the life cycle, so taking carbon from fossil to fuel, or from trash to fuel, it gives us a 70% reduction in the amount of carbon particles throughout the lifetime of that fuel for its use as well. So it gives us that, as I said, it's all about being responsible and doing what we can. It would be too easy to try and greenwash it and say it's the greenest fuel out there. But for me and the company, it's a start. We're hoping it's this kickstart to go forward. And then, well, I'm sure some of your listeners are some of the brightest brains as well. So they'll be the ones that we're expecting to coming back and say, well, we've got bio this, or have you thought about using hydrogen and different fuel types? So for us, it's just that first step in trying to clean up the industry for ourselves a little bit.
That's amazing. There's so much to that new propellant type, and amazing to hear that it's kind of on par with RP1 in those early testings. Is it something that you could see then scaling up into larger vehicles as being still possible, or is it more meant for the small sat launcher market? I guess if it's equal to RP1, it could kind of go anywhere.
I think so. It's really, as I say, because it's got the ability to have different types of fuels, so maritime, aviation, normal vehicle fuel, so kind of like diesels and such. Because it has that, it's got a huge amount of growth it can do. Do I expect to see a Falcon heavy filled with it? I think we need a lot of trash to do that. But there would be no reason that it couldn't do it.
There's a big island of plastic in the Pacific, from what I'm hearing. So set up an oil rig, refine. I think Elon's got one of those sitting around. Maybe we could use.
Well, that's certainly one thing. One of the ideas we were talking with is about being able to put the equipment on the back of some of the boats. So you see these big haulier companies that go through them, imagine having on the back of it, so the Ecosene, again, we love our containers. So if you ever see any air footage, you will see freight containers everywhere. That's what we love to use. And we can fit the whole Ecosene system into about 4 or 5 of these containers, have them at the back of the ship. The ship goes through, collects a bunch of the plastics, processes it. So not only is it saving itself on fuel, it's cleaning the ocean and giving itself a slightly better quality of fuel, which if anyone knows much about maritime knows that's a huge thing, is they are quite a dirty fuel. So it's got a lifespan that way. As I said, if we could find and other companies start to take an interest and want to use it, yeah, it would be irresponsible not to share that sort of technology or IP out. But there are a few places we're speaking to, and hopefully this year will be a big year for Ecosene with some announcements.
I look forward to those. I have to ask, have you guys connected with the ocean cleanup at all with their projects of cleaning the rivers? That's the first thing that came to mind.
So I have spoken to them at different events and different people from there, but there's not an official collaboration as of yet. I think what we're really doing at the moment, we've had some high-level testing done in the UK to sort of prove out the fuels as they're being shown. And our next big thing we want to do is sort of get a main demonstrator done so people can see this. While we're doing that, I've spoken to various companies in the UK, and I know you've got everything from the Smiling Machine up in Baltimore to the Ocean Cleanup. And we have one, the Helen MacArthur Foundation and things that are in the UK. So there are a few that we've reached out and we're having early discussions with to see what, if we can, once we've got the demonstrator up and running, what we can actually do to sort of fulfill this and try and make it Earth a little bit less plasticky.
It's amazing, a whole new sector coming really online in the last couple of years. With that, you referenced your launch complexes. Skyrora is approaching launch complexes differently. They're basically entirely contained in standard 40-foot or smaller shipping containers. Why was being portable so important versus setting up a traditional launch pad, and why shipping containers?
Well, that comes down to the environmental footprint again. So, and please don't take this as bashing American or bashing American launch pads. But we don't need an Andrews Air Force Base. We don't need wallops. We don't need anything that big. We literally could have a bit of concrete the size of a Walmart car park. It's all we really need. Somewhere steady to let the vehicle and the erector go, and then stage the containers for the filling around it. So we wanted to prove that we don't need to sort of wipe out a huge bit of natural life or grass, and especially in Scotland, areas that were being suggested. So Sutherland has a lot of peat bogs, for example. There's a lot of wildlife over in the Western Isles and Shetland. Same. So it's all, if you look at how all of these spaceports are being designed, they've all had the environment in mind for that. And that again is to go through with government regulations. So when we've looked at it, we've wanted to be able to keep everything so we can do as much in-house and be as vertically integrated as possible. So that was the whole reason behind it. It was, well, if we can do it in-house, we can sort of do it anywhere as well. And that's kind of what the big thing going over to Iceland in October was all about as well, was proving out that complex. So really we scraped the grass back, so we had the sort of volcanic rock underneath us, launch from there, and then after we attempt it again, we'll reseed the grass, and you would hopefully never know that anyone's tried to launch a rocket from there, let alone been there.
Really opening up a lot of new places, then being able to go temporarily launch, I guess, even in the case of, maybe something in the situation like the Ukraine, being able to offer opportunities to launch, if they needed satellites or something, that could be an easier deployable option.
That's it. Certainly, it's at the moment we've always been constricted with sort of equatorial launches and various different launch sites, but we're getting to the stage now that with a lot of the hard work being done by Blue Origin, SpaceX, NASA, and all these smaller commercial companies coming through in Europe at the moment, we're all looking to try and sort of beat those problems. I think that's the best term to say, beat the problems down and sort of prove that there are other ways that things can be done. And as you said, with things like the Ukraine and situations like that, imagine being able to launch a satellite instantly or very quickly to help people that are maybe suffering from an earthquake, to get a satellite up in a particular order or a particular trajectory in LTAN and such, so you can see and have that optical footage of real time for the health for the safety guys to help try and pull people out of rubble. Being able to have that sort of maneuverability, agility, really is something we see as being the next sort of step. So while SpaceX are really pushing forward to get to Mars and do everything there, this sort of complex allows for sort of earthbound problems, we think, and it was one of the main reasons it was developed.
Well, and then you guys will be ready to take over on Mars and do all the launches there. They just need the shipping containers and Starship.
That's it. I would love that. That would be great. Imagine that being shipped up to Mars on Starship, and then they're setting up Skyrora Mars. And here I thought it was great having Skyrora and Reykjavik and Skyrora in the Ukraine. Never mind Skyrora Mars.
Would you go to Mars if you have the chance?
Oh no! Oh no! 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 That's definitely not for me. I'm one to keep my feet on the ground. That's a young man's game. I may only be 40, but certainly I'd watch with interest, but I think I'd rather stay with my feet on the ground. I don't think you can get haggis over in Mars, so I'll stick to Scotland.
Don't think so. I know 10 years ago when they started talking about cruise, they said no chicken and no chocolate. And I was like, that's a right there. That's a couple things you got to have in your life. Talking about the United Kingdom and even just Europe coming online as a space industry, but a launch industry, what have been some of the restrictions and I guess roadblocks to getting to be actually operational in the United Kingdom? We saw Virgin Orbit just had their first attempt, which was one of the launch licenses. I know you guys are in the process of getting your launch license. What's the, I guess, industry and country been like with this new industry popping up?
I think there's been, well, I don't want to use roadblocks because roadblocks make you think of proper stoppages. A lot of them have been temporary challenges, which have been ways to come around. So you have things like regulatory. So the Americans have the FAA with that, and they were great in helping the UK government to try and help and sort of bring these regulations into play. But when you think back to when it first started with our teams over here, you had the UK Space Agency, which may have only been about 5, 10 people. I may be doing them badly there, so apologies if they did have more. But then you have our Civil Aviation Authority, the equivalent to the FAA over here. But they have never had to look at anything like rocket launches and things like that. So they had to get their head around what needed to be done. And then just as they started to get the sort of correct funding in and the correct people in comes the nasty COVID and sort of wipes out anyone's plans as a proper structure and a proper flow plan. So the fact that the guys have done so well, or the teams down there have done so well, is just absolutely tremendous to be able to see that we're not far away from getting our own license. And Virgin had their license granted. So those sort of challenges were overcome, even with a once in a lifetime sort of pandemic being thrown into the mix. Other challenges that might be in and around the sector at the moment, supply chain, companies that don't know they could possibly supply into space. So there are a few space companies in Scotland that even I didn't know about that were here up until I started working with Skyrora, and they supply cables out to NASA, SpaceX, things like this. So they are all suppliers. But then there's other companies that actually have equipment that is actually the same grade as space level equipment, but it's just they've never known that they could get into that business. So the Scottish government and the UK government sort of more that they're advertising this. I know the area I stay in, that Skyrora is in Midlothian, for example, they have a business association, and they bring us in on almost any meeting that we have for that purpose. So we can sort of say, well, this is what we do. If you think you can supply us or help us with something in our supply chain, let us know. And that's helped us sort of open those pathways up. But now there's other bits like Space Scotland, who have been brought forward by the Scottish government to help the Scotland as a whole to try and open up the infrastructure for space, which includes testing and supply chain and everything like this. So really over the last 5 years, the journey has, while there has been a huge amount of challenges, I think the active solutions that have came out of them has been absolutely tremendous. And I can't say I've ever seen that in any other sector.
That's great to hear that they're, it seems, open, or at least they're open to listening and then seeing how that's going to be a new industry and how that'll benefit them. I know Canada's just at the start of our maybe 5-year journey, just in the last week, with the announcement of the government starting to begin that process for launch licenses and stuff. How was navigating the pandemic for you guys? I know the UK and Europe got hit very differently. You guys are spread out in a number of areas. How did you guys navigate that? I believe you pivoted at one point, making hand sanitizer.
Yeah, that's correct. So it was a very strange time. So it's one of these things with regulations as well. So there's regulations for key workers who had to keep working, so healthcare workers, things like this. But then there were certain sectors that fell under an exemption that they could still work, and that was sort of aviation and space, which we kind of fell under but didn't. So we were very unsure how and we could push forward at that time. So a lot of the business team, like myself, we basically were okay, work from home. So I got a good 12 months working from home with a dog on my lap, sort of thing. Whereas some of the engineers, they would be staying together, so they were in a little bubble, so they could still keep working on the vehicle. Those 4 people together, and then, as you said, at one point when the government put out a bit of an SOS for face visors and for hand sanitizer. Well, the making of hand sanitizer actually uses high test peroxide, which is our oxidizer, or one recipe for it does. So obviously we had tons of this chemical available. So our CEO, Vladimir, said, well, we need to help the local community, sort of thing. So he did that, and we pushed, basically put that out, and our head of engineering and the team at the time sort of got the correct certifications for the face mask and for the hand sanitizer, so we can put them out. And the sort of people that we got these to were people high risk. So we have a organization called the British Legion, which I think is similar to the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, over in the US and such. I'm not sure what the equivalent in Canada would be. They got face masks. We made sure the local schools could get hand sanitizer, so when the schools were going back, care homes, things like that. So literally, we wanted to be helpful to our local area, because we were aware it's quite easy to be a company, come into an area and just sort of take. This was our chance to give back to our local community, and Vladimir really wanted us to get involved, and so we did.
I love that that came from even the top down. That's so important to take care of the communities. As you said, you come into some of these areas and it takes a lot, but being able to turn around and support that community and give back is so important. And so you said, if you've got the propellant laying around and was able to do it, why would it be the right thing to do for it? Skyrora SubOrbital program, you referred to it a little bit earlier, has been vital to getting up and running with Skylark, Nano, Mir, and L, being vital to the company's early history. How is the SubOrbital program shaped going into now the Skyrora XL's orbital program, and kind of what testing has been done that's going to transfer directly over?
Yeah, so I think the best thing to say is the Skylark L. We hopefully have another one going this year, and then potentially another one on top of that. So what that means is we have 3 that we could have. 70% of the vehicle is actually made up of what goes into XL. So the electronics, things like this. The biggest differences in the XL is the 70 kilonewton engine and the turbo pump, really, which is all going through testing at our sites just now. So there's a huge amount of data that comes out of the SubOrbital program that feeds in directly to the Orbital XL vehicle. For me, it's been really exciting seeing it. I always remember, for me, I came in day one, and for anyone that knows me will tell you I am not a space person or an engineer. So But what I mean by that is everything I talk about now, I've learned over my last 5.5 years. So what I thought in my first week or so was a cafetiere turned out to be part of the 3 kilonewton engine. So being able to see all these engines being built and things like this, and one day going into the workshop and seeing sort of the 30 kilonewton engine being put together. Next day, see a couple of weeks seeing a fuel tank, and then walking in a couple of months later, and then walking into a fully made Skylark L was just such a such a strange but exhilarating experience. I unfortunately missed the launch in October, but my team were out there, and I know they absolutely went through everything to get this mission done. Uh, think of the worst weather conditions you can get, and you're possibly still nowhere near. So we launch in October, just south of the Arctic Circle. We're having 100-mile-an-hour gusts. The road gets washed out by the rain and the wind. They have to redo the road, have to relay the cable. And the thing is, the Icelandic people in the area were great at getting this redone, so we could get this launch attempt off on the last day possible. But seeing that program, getting all the information, even though it was only off the launch pad and only maybe what 15, 20 seconds airtime, that gave us a huge amount that has already started to sort of tweak some of the information that goes into the XL for our design team and for our engineering team. So it's vastly important. Nowadays, you're seeing it sort of the way that SpaceX did it with their Falcon and their Falcon Heavy and moving all the way up. We are a much smaller vehicle and doing it in a much smaller way, but I can't understand how anyone could jump straight to an orbital vehicle nowadays and think they're going to be successful. It's such a hard process, and I think this is why looking at the likes of Firefly, who done so well on their first one and then second launch, and then seeing what Virgin Orbit's done. Okay, that was a horizontal rather than vertical, but seeing these sort of successes, but seeing the failures at the same time, it really helps to put in focus why the suborbital program is so important.
Yeah, and everyone always focuses on the worsts of the failures, but there's so much that comes out of those generally that can learn more. I mean, with the Virgin Orbit one, we had a horizontal takeoff. We had a rocket launch. It wasn't successful mission, but it was a start to that new chapter, and hopefully we'll see some vertical ones out of the UK as well. The Skyrora XL shares the same engine with the Skylark L, if I'm correct, right?
Very similar, it's just a larger one. So the SKL has a 30 kilonewton engine, and the actual XL has the 70 kilonewton engine with the turbo pumps. So, whereas Skylark L has one singular engine, the first stage on XL has 970 kilonewtons. So it'll make a nice rumble. That's for sure. So I look forward to seeing them when we do the static test of the first stage and just being close enough to feel the rumble, but far enough to be safe.
It's have you seen a launch before?
Other than the smaller launches, as I said for ourselves, I've seen numerous engine tests, but I've never been lucky enough to see one yet.
Fair warning, it's addictive. Once you see one, you get hooked and you just want more and more and more. My first one was September 2021, and I've done a bunch of Falcon 9s, and then I had SLS this year. And it's once you're, I'm like, how do I go down? I got Starship, and then everything else is smaller. But that's more exciting because you can get closer, and you're not as worried about this, nuclear blast that could come from it if it fails during liftoff.
Well, that's it. And I think that's the big thing and it's what is so great about all what's going on, as I said, with what's going on in Europe with the smaller launchers, and also what's going on in the US with the bigger launchers. It has basically lit that the red touch light again for people's enthusiasm around space. Yeah, it's kind of like when you see one of these bands or people that found Metallica back in the 80s and then people that found Metallica after Stranger Things. Those in between, there's always been those set fans. It's the same with rockets. You had those who were big fans growing up with the NASA programs, and then those have started again with SpaceX. Well, it's for those in between. Those are the ones that are super excited because they get to see both sides now. And then you've got the new generation coming in. They're like, oh, space, Mars, the moon, and it's like all over again. I know my parents were absolutely mad for all information that I share with them because they grew up during the original moon missions and things. And just thinking that's the sort of thing that I've grown up to do, which is, if we went back, as I said, I'm 40 now, if we went back even 20 years ago, just after I'd sort of graduated, no one would have thought twice that I would have ended up in space. And now I come from a very small town in Scotland, and I know there's 3 or 4 of us that have came out of this town now that are doing things in space. And it's just something that you would never have thought of. You would expect people to go into building works, electricians, the big area around here is finance, but now space is doing it. Space is a big sector coming up. You go to Glasgow, there's an old shipyard that used to build some of the biggest and best ships for international world trading, and that got shut down in the 80s and 70s, 80s, 90s, and it's now reopening up, but it's making spacecrafts under Spire, under ACC Clyde Space. So it's just went from making one type of ship to a different type of ship, really. And it's such an amazing time, especially in Scotland and the UK, for space. And I'm just delighted to be part of it, if I'm honest. And I can see why people are really excited about it again. It's because it has got that stage. You've got the big boys going for Mars. You've got the Europeans now trying to get a grip of their own sort of sovereign launch technologies. And it really is all about pushing forward, making Earth better, keeping it clean, looking out forest fires. It's just an amazing time to be in space, I think.
Yeah, I think it's such a different time because like I kind of grew up with, I remember Shuttle. I watched Shuttle as a kid growing up, and then it ended and I went through, kind of the second part of schooling before college and graduating high school, and there wasn't really a space industry that was aware that you could go into unless you knew of these little startups or something. And then SpaceX took off, and now it seems like the whole world's kind of caught on to space. You're seeing it in commercials again, you're seeing it everywhere, and it's exciting because I think for even with companies like Skyrora, I feel like space feels accessible again in a way that people feel like it's not as, I remember saying as a kid, I want to be an astronaut. People are like, oh, okay, you're 6, this is cute. But like now it's actually feasible that you could be an astronaut, or you could be part of a program that is putting astronauts in space. And I think people are more aware that there is so much more into the space industry. I know growing up, never thought of, oh, I could become a lawyer and do lawyering for space program. That wasn't a direct line of thought, and isn't in schools. And I think it's neat seeing that shift now and opening up, like you were saying, like the smallest of towns are turning out some of the most amazing people because we literally need everyone to be able to go to space properly.
That's it. And you've hit it right on the head there. And it's one of the things that I love doing, STEAM and STEM outreach. So I love to highlight what careers are there. So we have our lawyer, Laura Edison, who is wonderful. But I would say she's one of only maybe a dozen lawyers in the country that have that sort of specialization within space. And even then, she's had to learn that over the last 5 years. That wasn't what she studied in. She's been helped along with other experts within the industry, but she's made her name in that. Being things like that, there's doctors, there's everything like this. So as you said, it's the analog and the support sector around space. It's all needed there. Lord, if we talk about, for me, I think the accountant's one of the most important person when it comes to space, because if you don't have the accountant, none of us get paid. And we all do it for the love of the job, but we all do it to get paid. So it's making all the youngsters nowadays aware of everything you can be there. Okay, so maybe you're more hands-on. You might not be a design sort of engineer, but if you're hands-on, what's to stop you from being sort of welding engines after they've been 3D printed or things like this? So there's so many new roles, and it's, as you said, I think now we're no longer letting people fall through the cracks where they could be in the space industry. And the UK was really bad for that for a long, long time. Our biggest and brightest talents would be going away to the US for the ones that could get across to work over there, or they would be going to ESA to work there. But now they have a chance to sort of do that on our home soil.
We were in the same boat. We built the Canada arm, which I have to say, kind of a critical piece of the whole US space program, you know, with the shuttle and the station and everything. But other than like growing up, never heard about us building the Canada arm. Just we were super proud of the Canada arm, and that's why we put it on our money. But you never heard about, oh, the future ones are working in that industry. So that's really neat to hear that that's changing and kind of opening up there. As Skyrora shifts to the orbital market with the XL, will the suborbital program continue, or was that more just a proving grounds to test the earlier equipment, and now we're going to focus on the not large vehicle, but the larger small sat launcher vehicle?
It was very much a proving ground and sort of a de-risking process, though never say never is what I would say there. So throughout my last few years, I've had a lot of time to talk to the academic universities in different places, and there's a huge market for suborbital opening up. But the problem with that is you have to get the pricing right, which means you have to get the vehicle costing right. So if you think about a PhD who wants to have something tasted in zero gravity that goes down the International Space Station route, that can maybe be a 3-year wait for them to do that. And if that's to prove out a PhD, okay, maybe it's only costing 25,000 or 30,000 to get done, but that's 3 years until their PhD is completed. If we're able to figure a way to get this vehicle at the right costings, that we can launch, say, maybe 10 PhD programs at a time and still make a profit, yeah, we'll certainly look into that. So I know the UK government's looking into it and a few other companies to see what can happen because the UK is perfect for it. We're an island. We can launch and then sort of go and retrieve it from the sea quite easily for us. So I would hope Skyrora could have a second life, and it's not just going to be part of our proud history, that it could actually become a product on its own. But I think that will really depend on the market value, and what the advanced sort of production techniques we can bring into play to make it cheap enough to make it worth that market value.
Makes sense. You're seeing a lot more universities looking at launching, and that makes sense, seeing if that would fit in there for it. What are the, I guess, kind of cost differences between launching on to the ISS, I guess, per se, versus doing a suborbital? I would assume a suborbital would be cheaper, but I guess the ISS missions, you're already sending up like a Dragon, so it's here's an extra kilogram kind of thing.
Yeah, it's really the biggest difference there, as I said, is the wait time. At the moment, if we were to say the cost of the Skyrora XL that we're using, for example, it cost us about 1.2 million to make. So if we were to do that as a service, we would have to be making more than 1.2 million, which would be, let's see, we can take about 50 kilograms, give or take, into orbit with it, or into suborbital for 0G. So even 10 grand would only be about 500,000. So you're still talking about 20,000 for that purpose. Really, it's going to come out about the same costings, maybe. But that's why I'm saying we need to really work and see how we can drive the vehicle price down. But that's unfortunately not taken into account launch, how much it's going to cost from a launch site, how much insurance is going to be. So it's things like this. You need to make it. It's one thing making a vehicle that can do it. It's then making it so it can actually run without making a loss. And I think we see that a lot in the US. The companies over there get a lot of money from the government and subsidies for different projects. It's not the same here in the UK. So to give you an indication, the most recent contractor subsidies that you could go for in the UK was the CSTS Boost program, and it had a total capital value of 15 million. Which was for all the companies that could apply for it within the UK. So there's not a huge amount there for that purpose. And again, that's not me having sort of poking at the government saying it's not enough. Everyone wants more. It doesn't matter if you're healthcare, if you're police, fire. We all want more money into the sectors that we work at. But it just gives that indication when you look at the US, where their contracts could be worth 1.2 billion, whereas we're maybe going for 5 million. So until we can figure a way that we can cost effectively get the vehicles made and things, unfortunately, I think ISS is going to be the best route. But there are a few other smaller vehicles that I'm hearing of attempting it. So we wish them good luck. And as I said, hopefully we can get our vehicle price down so we can do it more and get a lot of those hardworking PhDs closer to their final goal.
Absolutely. Would Skyrora ever consider opening like a US chapter? I know we've seen like Rocket Lab's a US company, but in New Zealand and the US, so they can get US contracts. And we're seeing that with some others. Is that something Skyrora's ever considered once they've proven their vehicle?
So we have spoken with the FAA over SubOrbital for using a couple of the launch sites over there and to look at the licensing requirements. So long before the license requirements were out for the UK, we thought about applying for a US license to basically help us get ready for what we needed to do. Would we open in the US? If there was a big enough market for us to sort of jump into, I would probably say yes. But then you're basically, it's like us jumping in and you've got Firefly, who's new, Astra, ABL, Rocket Labs. So it's kind of, we would need to have something of really, really 100% launch record for us to sort of look at that in the short term. But in the long term, who knows? As I said, if it opens up to allow us to have contracts with more American companies due to ITAR regulations and missile control technology and things, all these regulations that are in play, if it helps us on a business model, I would say, yeah, there would be no reason not to do that, as I said. But at the moment, we'll keep it simple. We'll avoid all the regulations and just stick with what the UK has to say to us.
Yeah, ITAR is a fun one to start dealing with. I've worked with NASA and SpaceX's media, but I'm Canadian. So it's always fun when you're like, oh, I'm invited on site, but I can't go here and I have to be escorted everywhere. So it's fun navigating those regulations, even once you've passed the background checks. So you're gearing up for the first flight of Skyrora XL, and it's going to be launching out of SaxaVord Spaceport in the Shetland Islands. What challenges or a kind of new industry, I guess it would be, have the team faced for this historic first mission, not only of a new vehicle, but now working with a new unproven spaceport that we're really just seeing kind of finalized?
Yeah, well, to be honest, we've been working together for about 3-4 years. So really, since the conception of the company, as soon as we heard that the spaceports, there was 3 or 4 spaceports going for it, we started to open relationships with them, Sutherland and the Western Isles, and obviously SaxaVord, who we've chosen. The guys up at SaxaVord are wonderful. Frank, Scott, Yvette, who's now left, and Robin, who's there, who I've dealt with for the past sort of 4 years. They've went through every single growing pain you could go for in a company that you would think at a launch site. Environmental protests, looking through environmental assessments to see what animals are on site, looking to see how they can improve the infrastructure in the area, so roads for larger vehicles coming through, everything like this. And what I have to really say is what Frank and the team up there have done is really, really good for Shetland. They've managed to get sort of high-speed internet coming in. They've got some, as I said, some of the roadworks up to graded for them, which, if I'm being honest, you're on an island in Scotland. It's not the Westminsters or Holyrood, which is the Scottish government's number one priority. It's not a big city. It's not Edinburgh. It's not Glasgow, where I'm sure it's the same in Canada. You'll probably see the likes of Toronto, Winnipeg, Vancouver. These will be the ones that people are always fighting to get more infrastructure in and better things. And the small towns on the outskirts are sort of left waiting. But that's the big thing I can say the Spaceport team have done so well, is getting that infrastructure in place. And now we've seen the pads laid and starting to get there. And so, yeah, they could have had a lot of challenges, They're awaiting their license as well, and the range license. And ideally, what would be great is we can all get licenses like this year to try and get that orbital vehicle off the to give it a temp from there and just see where it goes. But I think it goes down to that normal Scottish mindset of, well, if you don't ask, you don't get. You need to keep going. You tell us we can't do something, we will find a way. Whether it's 3 men in a shed or half a dozen of us in an actual workshop, we will figure a way out to do something. And I think that's really the spirit of what captured the space industry, is everyone really looking to push it forward. So it could have been a huge issue, having new launchers and a new launch site and things like this. But I think because of how it's landed and the people that have been in charge of the projects, as I say, my CEO, Vladimir, is incredibly driven. And that goes down the sort of whole chain of command, that we're all driven in the same direction. Frank up in Shetland's driven to get this spaceport up and running. That means that once that's ready, he can look to, there's a small hotel up there that can be sort of reinvigorated so people can come and watch launches, which then means Shetland has people coming to watch launches, and that means it's no longer just depending on their fish and their oil industries. And so it really has taken lots of people to come together. So it sounds like it's easy because I'm just saying it's been the spaceport people and like rocket companies, but you've had to pull in the harbour masters, you've had to pull in the head of fisheries, the air traffic control, and local community councils, everything to sort of make sure that everyone is winning out of this, everyone is getting something back. And I think that's what we're seeing now, as I say, it is, whether it's from the educational front, the jobs front, and then obviously the science front and the commercial front for us, things are being pushed in the right direction, and it's just great to see.
Yeah, it's neat hearing kind of some of that stuff that they've had to work on, and I'm hoping to get up there in the next couple of months to still see it in some of its early stages. But it's a journey. It's up there. It's first you got to get over that sea, and then it's still a day's journey up to the north. But it's exciting to hear that even they're excited about having kind of that invigoration of people coming to the Shetland Islands and traveling through. And not only is that going to invigorate up there, it's going to hit spots all the way along for people actually taking some time to enjoy it, which is exciting to hear. Being one of the first launches out of SaxaVord, why SaxaVord? Why so far north? Why not a spaceport somewhere else on the south, or like where Virgin was launching off to the west? Why SaxaVord?
Well, for us, SaxaVord gives us perfect sort of maneuvers into orbit without having to do too many dogleg maneuvers or anything like this. So it's perfect for the sun synchronous and polar. Yeah, you also have Sutherland, who have us or building a spaceport, but you would have to do a sort of maneuver to get to those orbits as well. And then the ones out in islands are looking at that. So going south, it can be done, but it's a little bit more difficult. For that, going north, you've also got your sort of signal stations out in Greenland, Norway, things like this. So it picks up the signals for the vehicles and for the satellites a bit easier with that. And yeah, it's very remote, but I think when on top of that, it's possibly one of the most beautiful places you'll ever see, and I don't think you'll find a better looking launch site than the Shetland Isles.
Yeah, I've seen a few pictures from the site area recently, and I'm excited to get to go see it in person. It looks incredible. You have a launch agreement for multiple launches from SaxaVord. I believe there was also one with Maritime at one point for in Canada as well. Is that still in process, and are any other spaceports in the longer planning still being considered?
Yeah, so we've also been speaking to Maritime, and the main reason for that is to open up the trajectories that we can sort of assist with. So we have a set of inclinations that we can go from Shetland, but they will be within a sort of range. I'm not even going to try and bluff that, remember what they are. But having Maritime Launch allows us to have those extra ones as well. And when we started to meet with Stephen and that over maritime. It was conversations as they have a team working on rockets as well, and they had some of their team have worked with some of our team with the sort of Ukrainian backgrounds as well. So we just started to get to talking, and it's like, well, if we can do it, it would be great to have that option. Uh, Canada's a little bit closer to the UK general regulation wise, obviously as part of the Commonwealth, things like this, than going across to the US. So it is slightly easier for us to do that. So yeah, those are why those have came. But the discussions are ongoing at the moment. So I was speaking with them. What are we on today? Monday. So it would have been last week. And we're pushing them through to see what we can do together. But it's really exciting to see what their plans are. And as I said, if we are not one of the first that maybe go out of there for them, I'm sure Canada's got a lot to look forward to.
Hearing something in my country that I don't have to cross a border would be exciting to see, and I think just opens up another industry even here, which I feel like we're where the UK was 5 years ago. So I think we're looking to what you guys have done a lot on how that started up for how we're doing it. What does the road to normal operations look like for Skyrora? How frequently do we think the XL will be launching once it's a proven vehicle?
Certainly, we have stated we want to get up to about 16 launches a year, but that is really going to depend on the market. I know pre-COVID, we were looking at this, what was projected to be a massive burst of companies coming through, was lots and lots and lots of satellites for that. And since COVID, that burst hasn't really happened. So whether there'll be a market for 16 per year at the moment, that's something we're waiting to do. But what we expect is after the first successful launch happens, we want to sort of bring the cadence up slowly. So say, for example, from that first successful to 3 available manifests and then 5 available manifests. And we take it there on forward, ideally up to the 16, but that will take depending on what the client market is looking at that point.
I mean, right on to that. It's the new industry. It's growing at a rapid rate of new space companies that each are developing their own rocket to fill a smaller niche. What makes Skyrora stand out from other launch providers like RFA, Black Arrow, Orbex that are also starting up? And what aspects of the small sat market are you guys specifically looking at capitalizing on?
For us, well, those are two very good questions. So, what makes us stand out? So, I think we'll have to say is value for money. So, and when I say that, is what you look at the money that each of these companies have had invested into them and the infrastructure and what they have yet shown. So, by saying that, and I think you used the term that our competitors, if I was going to be quite frank with that list, that I would include RFA there, and I don't know how much the rest I would put in there. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the Black Arrows and things like this, but RFA have really shown what they've done with their money and sort of brought their technology forward. I can't say every company has done the same. What would make it stand out? I have to say the fact that we have that old school heritage from the Black Arrows that we've been working on, but then also mixing in some of the team who are from the Ukraine, some of the brightest minds in the UK, and having all that sort of that 2 sets of heritage from UK launch and then the Ukrainian launch side has given us such a strong understanding and knowledge and push forward that it's not starting from scratch as such. So whereas a company might have to start from scratch. So I don't know any other company that would have designed 3 engines and started to put them all through qualification in under 5 years like we have. So there's things like this, but I don't think we could have done that if we just had the ones with the Black Arrow history, or if we just had the ones from the working over in Dnipro and such. We needed both sides to be there, and I believe are stronger than others on the market.
As the business operation manager, I'm assuming one of the harder aspects of a new company is finding customers that are willing to fly on unflown or unproven rockets with a longer flight history. And it's probably becoming increasingly harder with things like the SpaceX transporter ride shares and things that we're seeing come online. How has Skyrora worked to I guess, not only develop a safer rocket that we've talked about, but find a way to get customers to trust to fly their payloads on a newer vehicle?
That's a great question, and a lot of that is coming down to the sort of de-risking process we're doing, SKL, things like this, proving that technology out. Other than that, it's really is. I come from a finance background, so I would have key stakeholders who I would speak with. Some I would speak with weekly, some monthly, some half yearly. Uh, and this is what I've sort of integrated in within the company from our client's point of view. So I will speak to our key clients and people that we want to work with. Some will want to speak to me monthly, some only want to speak to me every 6 months, and then other ones we will do quarterly. And we're very honest with them. We tell them what's coming up, what testing we've done. If they're in and around the area, so the likes of Clyde Space Inspire, we invite them to come along to the workshop, come and see the vehicle, meet the team, come to some of the engine testings. If they're a bit further away, we will share videos that we may not share in public, things like this, and show them actually what's all going on behind the scenes. We've tried to be as transparent as possible when it comes to it, and it seems to help. There are still companies there that say, yeah, we really don't want to be on your first one or second one, but we'll be on your third. If that's the case, that's fine. That's up to us to prove that our technology does what we say it does. But we have now, I would say, a good 5 or 6 companies that are still interested in the first couple of launches, who are willing to take that risk from what we've shown. We're getting to the right stages with them, and hopefully can get some announcements out in the near future. But again, I think anytime you put a lawyer into the situation and paperwork into the situation, everything gets extended by about 6 months. So, but I'm hoping we will get there, as I said, at some point this year, to make a couple of be in the first launch and things like that.
Exciting time then for the year ahead. So what does 2023 look like for Skyrora? What can everyone look forward to seeing for this year?
Hopefully a return to Iceland with a successful launch. I know our team's over there at the moment talking with people to bring back some of the equipment that needs a quick refurb before we go again. Further testing of the XL first stage, I would hope, engine testing and qualifications of the remaining engines, and then hopefully getting ready for tail end of 2023, beginning 2024 for the launch attempt. And as I say, those are the key sort of milestones that we're looking for. For me, very much looking forward to the second launch attempt of SKL, and as I said, the static test of the first stage, having all those 9 engines being tested, it's going to be the closest thing to a launch I've ever been to so far. So I really cannot wait to see that happen.
I think that's even almost more exciting, that your first launch is going to be your rocket. That's kind of a neat thing, that you're first are going through the milestones of getting to see your orbital rocket fly, which is really exciting. As we've kind of said throughout this, the space industry is really starting to pick up in the UK and in Europe. And we have this next generation that we were talking about that's looking at the space industry as an option. For those that are watching that are maybe either in school or about to graduate, what advice or encouragement would you give them to why they should consider Space One, but maybe UK Space or even Skyrora in their future?
I would say, if you're looking at space, a couple of things that I would say to you is get your hands dirty, whether it's model rockets yourself or 3D printing things. Any hands-on sort of things like this will help you going forward. So join university clubs. When I grew up, and I'm sure now when you're growing up, you will see people make fun of the AV club, or they make fun of the rocketry club and things like this. That means nothing when you get older. Having this knowledge of the AV club could be what leads you down to working on an optical mission for a satellite company, or working on electronics for a rocket company like us. Same with the rocketry, actually having your hands on and knowledge about these things is a tremendous how much that can help you along. So follow your passion. You're always going to have people that think it's a little bit geekish or dorky, but you just have to look at things like how spaces came along, but then look at movies, for example. Comic books are geeky, and now you've got Marvel, and everyone loves Marvel, and that sort of thing. So things go on trends and roundabouts. But if you have a passion for it, go for it. Really go for it. Get involved. Go and listen to these podcasts. There's different things. You have over here. We have Space Bar, which I'm not sure if you've heard of, and it's basically one Thursday every month, and it's the UK space community that come together and sit and talk about all different things, everything from aliens to the newest type of engines to, and then it just falls into a rabble. They've had everyone from sort of Tim Peake on there as well, Helen Sharman speaking, so the UK astronauts. Things like that, get involved and get talking to people. A lot of the ones that go on there are students at universities, and that's how I've got to know them. And then one of the ones I got to know ended up working with us, came in, so we were having an event. We invited him to the event where he met some of the team. He got an internship. That internship turned to a full-time role, and he's recently left us and is now with Rocket Lab. So things like this, it can happen. It's amazing how these things happen. So yeah, really go, just keep following that passion, and then with the schoolwork side of things, just be aware, speak to people, reach out, ask what courses should I be doing if I really want to do this. And I've known people that said you'll never ever do this, or you can't do this. We have a member in the team who, I don't want to name him because he would kill me for it. But basically, he was told to just go and get a job as a sort of labourer working on a building site. And he is now basically a world-class engineer for rocket engines. So just because someone else says you can't do it doesn't mean you can't do it. Just be, if you've got that passion, follow it.
Oh, I love that. That's so good because it's so true. And you never know what that future is going to hold. And more doors are opening everywhere. And I feel like the rocket world's getting smaller. It's a rather small industry, as you pointed out, people coming and going and moving around and sharing knowledge, which is absolutely amazing. But Derek, thank you so much for your time and insight into everything Skyrora today. It's super exciting what you guys are doing, and we're excited with the Launchpad team to be covering it and counting down hopefully to that orbital launch, or even for the launch in Iceland. We'd hopefully be coming over that way in a few months, and maybe we can meet up in person, do a follow-up there, and actually see some of your operations.
No, perfect. If you're over here, please let us know. We'll see, maybe get you behind the scenes in the factory or test site or something like that, depending what's going on.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much, Derek.